Good evening, everyone. Thank you so very much for being here tonight. We're picking up where we left off today. We looked at the scriptures regarding the end of the world and the actual second coming of Christ and how that's one and the same event. And we looked at the fact that there's a lot of misinterpreted scriptures regarding the apocalyptic languages that are in Daniel and in Revelation. It is also something that happens in these two chapters, Matthew 24 and Mark 13. And so I wanted to look at those two chapters tonight and show, I hope that I can show, that it's not difficult to understand whatsoever if you pay attention to the context. There's the three things I like to say when it comes to Bible study: context, context, context. And so that's how you understand Matthew 24 and Mark chapter 13. They are sister passages, I like to say. Not twins, but definitely when you read them both, you can clearly see that they have a strong resemblance. They cover the same topics. They are both about when Jesus explains two separate times that were to come: the destruction of Jerusalem, which happened in the year 70 AD, and the destruction of the world, which obviously has not happened yet, but certainly will. When you look at Matthew 24, you will see that Matthew, the entire Gospel of Matthew really, is more wordy. No offense whatsoever to Matthew. It's absolutely inspired by God. But Matthew's personality was one to be more thorough, and Mark's Gospel is more straight to the point. And so when you look at Matthew's Gospel, when you look at Matthew 24, you're going to see a lot of language that you'll also see in Mark, but not quite as wordy. You're going to see things that really capture your attention, like when Jesus says in both of them, that these stones, there won't be one left on another when he's talking about the temple. And he also mentions in Matthew 24 about wars and rumors of wars and kingdom against kingdom, earthquakes in various places, things of that nature. You see a lot of the language that is there. And of course, Daniel comes up in Matthew 24 as well as in Mark 13. All of this is very, very interesting. I find it easier to explain in Mark 13 than in Matthew 24, but both are the same trick of the trade: focus on the context. But for this lesson, we're going to look mostly at Mark chapter 13. And it begins this way: As he came out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what wonderful stones and what wonderful buildings." Jesus said to him, "Do you see these great buildings? There will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down." Wow, that's a strong statement, especially as a Jew. As far as they were very proud of the temple and all of the extra buildings that King Herod had added to the temple. And to say that is shocking. But that's exactly what he says. And he says it so thoroughly. There will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. And he sat on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple. Peter and James and John and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us when these things will be. And what will be the sign when all these things are about to be accomplished?" They asked him point blank, "When will these things be?" What things? Well, what he just said. He said, "There will not be left one stone upon another that will not be thrown down." That was his statement. And their question about that statement is, when's that going to happen? That's Matthew 24. That's Mark 13. It's about them asking him this very important question and him answering the question. So, he tells them when all these things will happen. We pay close attention there to understand all of Mark 13. We pay close attention to verse 2. Again, he says, do you see these great buildings? There will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. You look at the language of Mark 13, and he continues to talk about it. And unless you're looking or trying to make the text say something else, it is obvious that he's answering the question. Dare I say it? A simple question. Jesus, wow. The temple's going to be completely destroyed? Not one stone will be left on another? When is that going to happen? And how are we going to know when it's going to happen? That's the question, and here's the answer. Starting in verse 5, Jesus began to say to them, see that no one leads you astray. Yes, this is a good time to say that, because so many people are led astray on Mark 13, Matthew 24. See that no one leads you astray. Many will come in my name, saying, I am he, and they will lead many astray. And when you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. This must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places. There will be famines. These are but the beginning of the birth pains. He is telling them the answer to their question. And he's saying to them something he wants them to remember. That I told you that this temple is going to be destroyed. And you asked me when and how we're going to know it's going to happen. Before it happens, there are going to be things that you think is the end of Jerusalem. You're going to think, because it's going to be scary. You're going to see wars and rumors of wars about that. Oh, is this it? You're going to know about an earthquake here and an earthquake there. And you're going to think, is this it? Is that what Jesus was talking about? And he says, no. Remember I told you, this is but the beginning of birth pains. When you look at God's judgment on Jerusalem or anywhere, God warns the people. God gives them things, catastrophic things that wake up a human to how frail he is. Earthquakes and wars. How strong do you feel when you, especially where they lived, when war could happen in your streets? Well, they know something that you and I pretty much don't know. War ruins everything. That's a very scary thing for someone, especially in Jerusalem. When that happens, what should you do? You should recognize how badly you need God, how much you want the Messiah. And it really should wake you up to think, was Jesus of Nazareth the Messiah? And when the earth shakes, remember, that happens when he's crucified as well. When he's crucified, there was darkness, unexplainable darkness, and a huge earthquake. That's there as a sign of judgment and worse judgment to come. When they crucified the Lord of glory. He says, when you see these things, it's the beginning of the birth pains. But we're still talking about answering the simple question, when will these stones not be lying on one on another? Mark 13 goes on. Verse 9. Be on your guard, for they will deliver you over to the councils, and you will be beaten in synagogues, and you will stand before governors and kings for my sake, to bear witness before them. And the gospel must first be proclaimed to all nations. And when they bring you to trial and deliver you over, do not be anxious beforehand what you will say, but say whatever is given to you in that hour. For it is not you who speak, but the Holy Spirit. Notice the word you. Very important. Peter, James, John, Andrew asked him specifically when this is going to happen. He's answering. Context, context, context. You, Peter. You, John. You, James. You, Andrew. You. They're going to drag you into the synagogues. They're going to grab you, apostles especially, and they're going to beat you in the synagogue. I'm talking to you. He's still answering the question about when these great buildings are going to fall. And it's going to be in the time of the apostles. It's even easier to see in the coming verses. Verse 12. Brother will deliver brother over to death, and father his child, and children will rise against his parents and have them put to death, and you will be hated by all for my name's sake. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. The end of what? Well, he's still answering the question. When will these buildings be torn down? You're going to see some things that are going to be scary. That's not it. That's the very beginning of it. God is going to judge Jerusalem and show his judgment by tearing this temple down. You're going to hear wars and rumors of wars. You're going to see earthquakes, and that's just the beginning of it. And there's going to be people threatening your lives. That's just the beginning of it. Verse 14. But when you see the abomination of desolation standing where he ought not be, let the reader understand. This is really cool, and I like that word cool in this spot here. When you see the abomination of desolation standing where he ought not be, let the reader understand. Well, that seems odd. Well, doesn't he want us to read and understand all of it? Yes. Let the reader understand. Why would he say that? Because there's scripture where someone is told not to understand. We're going to look at Daniel. And when Daniel was given the prophecy about the temple being abominated, he said, what does this mean? And God tells him, seal it up. It's not for your time. Then Jesus comes along, as is recorded here in Mark 13, Matthew 24, and he says this statement, let the reader understand. He's saying, up until this moment, you could not understand this. But now, let the reader understand. And to this day, I want you to see, let the reader understand. Not the phony, baloney cult leader understand and tell you what he thinks. Let the reader understand. God expects you and I to read this and understand. That's right. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. I want you to notice this. In the way he's talking, he's saying, this is happening, it's going to be scary, but it's not, it's just the beginning. But, when you see this, flee to the mountains. In other words, when you see this, run. He's talking about the end of Jerusalem. And he says you're going to see some scary stuff. And in fact, in 66 AD, they started to see the troops lining up around Jerusalem. And they were there for years. And it was like, okay, Rome's kind of, strict and whatnot. They're trying to scare us and make us do what they say. No, the clock's ticking now. They're surrounding the city, and everything's going to be fine for years. But in 70 AD, they enter the temple. When you see that, run. Now, I want you again to look at this, the abomination of desolation. I want you to really pay attention, let the reader understand. This takes us back to Daniel 12. Now, our text is Mark 13. I hope you can stick with me. We have to look at Daniel 12 to know what this means in Mark 13. The abomination of desolation, let the reader understand. So, Daniel 12. I heard, but I did not understand. That's Daniel. Then I said, O my Lord, what shall be the outcome of these things? He said, Go your way, Daniel, for the words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end. Daniel, the prophet, said, I don't understand. And God's answer was, you don't need to understand. It's not for your time. These words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end. Many shall purify themselves and make themselves white and be refined. This is talking about the gospel. God is telling Daniel, and Daniel does not understand, that at this time that's being prophesied about, it's during the new covenant. Many shall purify themselves and make themselves white and be refined, but the wicked shall act wickedly. And none of the wicked shall understand, but those who are wise shall understand. From the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away, okay, 580 AD, BC, 580 years before the Christ, Daniel is getting this prophecy. And it's a prophecy about 2 times in the future. One time during the Greek Empire, when the Greeks took over the world, and then it's also about the time when the Romans took over, which is the time of Jesus. God is telling Daniel that this is going to happen, and when this abomination happens, they're going to stop sacrificing in the temple. And what happened is the Greek king, Antiochus IV, Epiphanes, he came in, instead of worshiping the true God, he set up an idol to Zeus, and he sacrificed pigs in the temple. That's what this means. From the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away, and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he who waits and arrives at 1,335 days. That's talking about, there was a time when he stopped the true sacrificial animal worship toward Jehovah, and he's sacrificing pigs. And the Jews were fighting against him, fighting against the Greeks to get that to stop. And he says, blessed is he who waits and arrives a little bit later. Because this is going to happen. You like your idols? I'm going to bring you a king from Greece, and he's going to put an idol right in the temple. See how you like that? And it's going to be there because God said it would. But not forever. And so God saw to it that Epiphanes would also lose, and that the temple would pick up again correctly. Verse 13, but go your way to the end. Who's he talking to? Daniel. Daniel, go your way to the end, and you shall rest and shall stand in your allotted place at the end of days. This is also telling. I want you to see. God tells him the time of the end, till the end, and then he uses another phrase, the end of days. That's 2 different times. He's talking about the end of what you know, Daniel, Judaism. What you know, Daniel, the end of being a Jew and having a temple and animal sacrifices. These things you're not going to know, and no Jew is going to know until it happens in 70 AD. And he tells Daniel, you shall rest and shall stand in your allotted place at the end of days, so to speak, he'll all understand by and by. Daniel will understand after all these things take place. But notice the two different ways to talk about the end, the time of the end, till the end. It's not the same thing as the end of days. This is the end of something else. The end of Jerusalem is what that is. The end of the time when Jerusalem has the law of Moses. And those who are wise shall understand. Those in the future, not you, Daniel, those in the future shall understand that. You'll see. See, Daniel did not understand, amazing as it is. Probably it would shock Nebuchadnezzar to find that out. He's impressed with Daniel. Daniel knows everything. Daniel knows what God tells him. Daniel's a human being. Much better man than me, but still, he's human. He knows what God tells him, but he wanted to know this. What does this mean? Abomination of desolation. What does that mean? Daniel did not understand. The angel told him the words are sealed up until the time of the end. Daniel is told that in the time of the end, the wise will understand. Remember, Jesus says in our text in Mark 13, let the reader understand. God tells Daniel that someday everyone's going to understand this. And then Jesus comes along 500 years later and says, let the reader understand what I'm talking about. Daniel is told, and from the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away, and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, there will be 1,290 days. Then he is told, blessed is he who waits and arrives at 1,335 days. Now, in apocalyptic language, you have a time, times, and half a time. A time, times, and half a time. That's 3.5 years. That's a symbolic number. Why is it symbolic? Well, because this represents what happened when the Greek king was an abomination in the temple. And it also represents 70 AD, when the Romans were standing where they ought not. It represents 2 times. When God uses this language, it usually helps you understand that it's a prophecy about more than one time in the future. So, when we learn about the Romans, we're reminded, God reminds us, remember what I did with Nebuchadnezzar? Yes, Lord. Remember what I did with Persia? Yes, Lord. Remember what I did with the Greeks? Yes, Lord. Why would I have any problem with the Romans? That's what he's saying. When you have this symbolism going on, it's so that the same principle can be applied to different times in what would be the future. All right, so this is what happens with Daniel. Let's go back to our text. Jesus said, when you see the abomination of desolation, when you see Roman people, Gentile dogs in the temple, standing where they ought not, you need to understand it's time to flee, it's time to run, time to go. Look, we're still looking at verse 2. We're still answering the question. Jesus is still answering their question. When will these things be? Let the one who is on the housetop not go down, nor enter his house to take anything out, and let the one who is in the field not turn back to take his cloak. And alas, for women who are pregnant, and for those who are nursing infants in those days, pray that it may not happen in winter. Again, This is obvious. There's no language about the end of the world here. Does it matter if it's winter when God destroys the world? No. Does it matter if it's the end of the world that, you're nursing a baby or you're pregnant? No. When it's over, it's over. So, in our context here, in Mark 13 and Matthew 24, Jesus is still answering the question about the destruction of Jerusalem, the end of the law of Moses for the people. He's still answering the question about what he said in verse 2. So, verse 19. For in those days there will be such tribulation as has not been from the beginning of the creation that God created until now, and never will be. What's he talking about? How awful it was to be under siege in Jerusalem. That's what he's talking about. We're not even going to go into all of it tonight as far as the history books and what they said. Just know that it was horrifying to be trapped in Jerusalem in 70 AD. Horrifying. And it has never been that bad since. If the Lord had not cut short the days, no human would be saved. For the sake of the elect, whom he chose, he shortened the days of the actual destruction of Jerusalem. That's what he's saying. And then if anyone says to you, look, here's the Christ, or look, there he is, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform signs and wonders to lead astray, if possible, the elect. Be on guard, I have told you all things beforehand. He said to the people who were living in Jerusalem, he said to Peter, James, John, and Andrew, you be sure and tell them, if you do not run when I tell you to run, and you're stuck in Jerusalem, it's going to be awful. And people are going to say, this is the end of the world. Look, there's Jesus. Don't believe him. It's not the end of the world. It's the end of Jerusalem in an awful, terrible way. It's not the end of the world. That's what 19 through 23 is saying. In those days. What days? The days when these great buildings are torn down and there won't be one stone left upon another. He's still answering that question. The question there in verse 2. Verse 24 through 27. In those days, after that tribulation, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. Then you will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. Now, when you look at that, you have to really know your Bible. You have to know this language. You have to know that this is prophecy language for the transfer of power. Then he will send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. These are the martyred Christians throughout the world, the known world at the time. At the destruction of Jerusalem is a very bad time of persecution for Christians. Still not talking about the end of the world. Here in Mark 13, it has this phrase, among other things here, the Son of Man coming in the clouds. I remind you that when he's on trial in the next chapter, when Jesus is on trial in Mark 14, he uses that phrase. They ask him to speak plainly, are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? Jesus said, I am, and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power, coming with the clouds of heaven. And the high priest tore his garment and said, what further witness do we need? Jesus was telling the high priest that he was going to see Jesus coming in the clouds. That is language about a change in power. And he's saying that to the high priest. You are going to be out of power. Yes, I am the Son of God. And you're going to know it for a fact. And he doesn't say 70 AD, but that's what he means. you're going to know it for a fact. Because you're going to see me in the old language coming with the clouds of heaven. This language that you can see, it's the same kind of language for the transfer of power that we read about in Isaiah 13:10 when it talks about Babylon. Same exact thing about the sun, being dark and the moon turning to blood and the stars falling. You see that in Ezekiel 32:7 and 8 when it talks about the fall of Egypt. Same poetic language in Joel 2. And in Acts 2, Peter says, this is what the prophet Joel said. Well, what did Joel say? He said these words. He said that the sun will be darkened and the stars will fall. These kinds of things. It just means, in the Jewish language, there's a huge transfer of power. That's what it means. Which happened in 70 AD when they tore down the temple. So again, he tells them, he's answering the question, when will these things be? Verse 28, he says, let me put it this way. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branches become tender, it puts out its leaves, and you know that summer is near. So also will you see these things taking place. You know that he is near, at the very gates. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until these things take place. Again, super important to understand. He's talking to his apostles, his disciples. And they asked him, when will these things be? And he's saying, you're going to see it. This generation will see the end of Jerusalem. This generation of humans, back then, those people will see 70 AD. You won't be glad you saw it, but you will see it. That's what this means. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away. So, from verse 2 all the way to verse 30, he's talking about one thing, the destruction of Jerusalem. Then, in verse 31, he says, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But concerning that day, or that hour, no one knows. Not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Wait a minute. What day? What hour? What's he talking about? Concerning that day or that hour. Greg, how do you know he changed gears here? Well, because he says, heaven and earth will pass away. He's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem all the way until he changes the subject to the end of the world. Verse 31, heaven and earth will pass away. Concerning that day and that hour, nobody knows when that's going to happen. The destruction of Jerusalem, you're going to see it coming. The end of the world, no one's going to see it coming. Only the Father knows that day. Heaven and earth will pass away. It's going to happen, and no one's going to be ready. No one's going to be able to say, I see it coming. Nobody. So he says in verse 33, be on guard. Keep awake, for you do not know when the time will come. What time? The time when heaven and earth passes away. He says it's like a man going on a journey. When he leaves home and puts his servants in charge, each with his work, and commands the doorkeeper to stay awake. Therefore, stay awake, for you do not know when the master of the house will come, in the evening, or at midnight, or when the rooster crows, or in the morning, lest he come suddenly and find you asleep. And what I say to you, I say to all, stay awake. I want to elaborate on what I was saying this morning. God's plan for us is to hope that today is the day. Now, I don't know, and I don't want to know, what kind of man I would be if I was not thinking that the Lord might come back this very moment. If I knew for a fact that I was going to live, my health is good, and I'm going to stay, careful when I cross the street, and I know for a fact Jesus is not coming back for 10 years. You don't want to know the Greg for the next 9 years. You just don't want to know me. But if I don't know when he's coming back, if I have no idea, but it could be today, you see, that's extra strength for me to do what's right. Extra strength for me to ask myself, is this what you want to be doing when the Lord returns? See, this is the mentality of the Christian. The mentality is the same. He says, what I say to you, I say to all, stay awake. You do not know when the end of the world is coming. They would know when the end of Jerusalem is coming. No one will know when the end of the world is coming. And that's good for you not to know. Let no one deceive you. Jesus prophesied about the destruction of Jerusalem correctly, so that they would see it coming and not lose their faith. It's an amazing thing. Think about it. Gospel of Mark, Gospel of Matthew, they were written before 70 AD. And those things came to pass, just like he said. Jesus also prophesied about the end of the world, and he did it correctly, saying, stay awake, because no one will see it coming. As he says in our sister verse in Matthew 24, for in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day when Noah entered the ark, and they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away. So will the coming of the Son of Man be. 2 questions, 2 answers in Matthew 24 and Mark 13. When will the end of Jerusalem come? And when will the end of the world come? And he answers it line upon line, precept upon precept. And he was exactly right. So all there is left is for us to be ready and help others to be ready. The harvest time is coming on, and the reaper's work will soon be done.